Coming up on today's episode of Real Talk Rentals, we're going to talk about the top 3 things your property management company should be doing for you. Welcome back to Real Talk Rentals, a podcast brought to you by OnQ Property Management. We're here to give you all the tips and tricks that go into owning a rental property and the behind-the-scenes scoop on property management. I'm Ben. I'm your host. With me, as always, my co-host, Mr. Eric Dixon, the go-to expert on all things rental, property, and real estate out here in Arizona. And in this episode, we're going to do Everybody Loves a List. So we're going to hop into another one of those lists. We're going to do the top 3 things a property management company should be doing for you. You've hired someone. This is the bare minimum of what you should expect, right?
Yeah.
All right. So let's just kind of divide them up then and go 1, 2, 3. So what is, Eric, the number one thing a property management company should be doing for you?
Well, we get asked all the time too, like, what do you guys do besides collect rent?
Yeah.
And I'm like, actually, that's the number one thing we do.
Yeah.
We collect the rent. But I think the understanding people have is different. Do you just collect the rent and then you like pick up the physical check and deposit it in the owner's account, or what,
Right.
what happens? So when we are going through it, it's collecting rent is this big umbrella of things. It's accepting the payment. So that's whether it's check. We don't take cash, but I guess some property management companies may take cash.
Seems like a bad idea.
Yeah, we used to, and it was just a pain, man.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, I brought that yesterday. It's like, so it's he said, she said, and then having cash just in your business is tough. So we do a ton of online payments. So, through a portal, they've got to have a way to pay online. So one of the questions you should ask your property management company if you're interviewing them too is, do you accept payment online? If they don't, and they're like, sorry, it's paper check, you got to come in the office or mail it in, red flag. Okay.
Yeah.
You got to find a way to track the tenant's ledger and the owner's ledger. So that's part of collecting rent, right? I collected the rent, I put it on the tenant's ledger to cover all the charges. Then it's double accounting, goes to the owner and shows all of the income coming in and all the expenses going out. Sounds pretty simple, but that's a bare minimum.
Yeah.
And
then
then
it's something you don't think of when it comes to like thousands of dollars coming in.
Yeah.
It's like, they're collecting the money from you, but you should be able to track all of that.
Well, and I can tell you from like a self-managing landlord in the past, collecting cash from my fourplexes and stuff. And then it's like, it goes in an envelope. And then I'm like, oh, I'll track it on a spreadsheet. And then like months go by and you're like, I don't really keep track of it.
The first apartment I lived in when I got married was in downtown Huntington Beach, little like bungalow we rented from the people in front of us, this older couple, super sweet. We paid cash, and they just 1 month, they were like, they forgot
that you paid.
No, we forgot to give it to them.
Oh.
And then I was like, oh, I'm sorry. And she's like, oh, you did. I was like, no,
but
I could be stealing $1,000 from you right now, but I'm not going to do that. But yeah, she was just all, handshake deal. There was no lease or anything.
No, and it just becomes tricky. And it's even just like, even if the payments are on time and stuff, it's like you need to have, whether you're going to go sell the property or whether you're going to do your taxes or whatever you're going to do, you need some sort of ledger and payment system, right? So part of that is that your management company should also provide monthly and year-end statements. So all income, all expense, monthly, and then at the end of the year, usually in January. Part of collecting rent, and the air quotes I'm doing, if you can't see it, is the ability to evict or do a partial payment plan and just know the laws of evictions and late rent.
If people aren't paying.
So there is a management company here locally that they don't handle evictions. So basically they give the owner a to-do or like evict on your own type packet. And it's like, hey, this is all you have to do. Call the attorney, you do it. But it's like, and so it's one of those things like, no, your property manager should do the whole eviction.
Yeah.
If they don't, like I said, another red flag, right? Part of collecting rent too is negotiating and doing the lease renewal. So it's like you collect rent for 12 months or 24 months or whatever it is. And then negotiating the lease renewal, getting the lease renewal signed and, upping rent if necessary or changing terms, whether you change landscaping or pool service or whatever it is. So they need to be able to do that. And then last but not least, collecting rent. So you imagine somebody just saying like, that's all you do, Ben, you just collect rent and you charge X amount a month. So it includes all of those things we mentioned, including managing it like a business, and so I look at it like it's not just collecting rent for a little rental. It's like, no, you hired us to manage your business, your investment, your whole thing. So
Sure.
there's no, personal or emotional attachment. It's just business to us.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we collect the rent, goes on the ledgers, you get your direct deposit, you get your statement. We're on call 24/7. And that's what collecting rent is. And so that list is basically what justifies the monthly management fee.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, working here, you notice the first of the month, people are just coming in and paying. The people that don't do online. And it's like, they come in and they might be like, that's the opportunity to be like, hey, I want to talk to somebody about this isn't working or something. And then if you're doing this yourself, that's going to be your tenant coming up.
Or it's when you knock on the door and you're like, hey, I'm here to get the rent. And they're like, oh, I'm glad you're here. Come look at all the things wrong with the house.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So we're that shield for you.
Yeah.
Hiring a property manager. All right. Bucket 2 then. What is the second thing a property management company should be doing for you?
So I didn't kind of mention it on purpose with collecting rent, but it's handling maintenance. So it is kind of separate from the collection of the actual money. But maintenance is one of the hardest things with property management, self-managing, whatever it is, because it's unpredictable and it can be $100 or it can be $20,000.
Sure.
And everything in between. It could be an insurance claim. It could be, something crazy. So as far as what you need to expect from your property management company is they need to be on call 24/7 in some way. If they call at 2 a.m. and they don't get a live person, that's reasonable. But if there's a voicemail left, that they get a call right back, or whatever it is. Sometimes, when I was on call back in the day, I was doing on call when I was the property manager, and, I'd wake up or I'd let it ring. It's 2 a.m. If they left a voicemail, I'd call them right back. If they didn't leave a voicemail, oftentimes it was a wrong number. Somebody was just on our website, just clicking around,
just trying to find
something. And it's like, so, but during business hours and while I'm awake, if it rings, you just answer it. But if it's 3 a.m. and you get that call and they leave a voicemail, it's like, no, there's a fire, flood, AC's out in July, something like that.
Usually they click around, they end up getting a sales guy if it's not too late, because they're the ones that are always answering the phone.
They're like, a sale, let's go.
Yeah.
Oh man.
11 p.m. on a Friday. I'll take the call.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so part of maintenance is the property manager is facilitating between 3 parties: the owner, the tenant, and then this contractor or vendor.
Sure.
And so they need to have the ability not only to verbally do it and by email, but have some sort of platform to communicate your invoices, your pictures, your before and after pictures, the work order and that sort of stuff. They should also have a proven and vetted list of vendors.
Oh yeah.
Like your property manager,
all the time.
They should, if there's a leak, it shouldn't be like, hey, our plumber's busy.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what about the backup?
Yeah.
And the backup's backup.
Or be like, Google me some phone numbers and send them back and I'll call. It's like, no, you should have those numbers.
Yes. Yeah. So they shouldn't just be that us as the management company are using somebody for the first time and your property is the guinea pig.
Right.
It should be, hey, we've used these guys before. They're in our top tier of people. We kind of know their pricing. We trust them. They're vetted. They've done criminal background checks on their technicians, whatever it is, right? So whatever those bare minimum things are, and then the last thing with maintenance is determining to make sure the responsibility is right. Like, is this an owner expense issue or a tenant expense issue? And so a lot of times when the tenant makes the call and says, hey, this has happened to me personally, is they say, hey, the disposal doesn't work. And I'm like, all right, cool. That's obviously mechanical error. I would be responsible. If they find, a toy in there, that's a tenant issue. So they went down there and they found a shot glass all jacked up and shards everywhere in the disposal.
Happens often.
And the tenant's like, oh dude, I didn't know that fell in there.
Yeah.
And the tenant was responsible for the replacement of the now broken, disposal. So as the owner, I was like, oh sweet, I don't have to pay whatever cost it is to replace it. But man, that sucks for the tenant, but it's their fault, And so I went into it thinking, oh yeah, I'll absolutely pay for it. And then they came back and said, no, but the property manager determined that it's a tenant responsible issue.
Yeah. And we talked about this so many times, but it's so important is that the PM company is kind of that, they take the emotion out of it. They're, no objective. They're just looking at the facts and saying, because you own this, you might walk in and, like you said, be like, "Ah, this thing was working perfectly. I know it was.
Yeah.
Like they did something to it."
Yeah.
And it might not be that simple,
Yeah.
and having someone who will look at it objectively and say, no, actually, this person needs to pay, or you
Yeah.
need to pay.
Well, and sometimes we have to give bad news to the owner. Sometimes it's bad news to the tenant, and sometimes it's both, And
Yeah.
what sucks is maintenance in general.
Yeah.
It sucks for both parties. And really what your property manager should be doing is making it suck a little less.
Sure.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
It should be, hey, it's going to cost you the same. You got to hire somebody to do it, but maybe you didn't have to deliver the bad news to the tenant that, hey,
Sure.
sorry, your AC is not going to be fixed till tomorrow.
Yeah.
The part's coming in, or, hey, sorry, you're not going to have hot water until, after the weekend because there's not a plumber that's available or whatever. And your property manager should know how to do that and communicate. And so if your property manager can make it suck less, then they're doing a good job.
And we should note that some property management companies, we don't, but there are ones that do, and it just depends. There are ones that charge per maintenance in some way. Yeah.
Well, some of them are like, oh, we charge the tenant, and it's like, what's going to happen is the tenant's just not going to call in maintenance.
Exactly. Right.
And you're going to get a property that's like everything's leaking, there's damage, and you're like, what the heck happened? And the tenant didn't want to pay $50 or $100 every time something broke.
Sure. And I think that's the advantage too. Just to piggyback on this, of full service like we do and a lot of PM companies do, but having those inspections, because a tenant might be like, dude, I know I dropped the shot glass down there. I'm just going to live without a disposal.
I'm going to live without a disposal. Maybe they'll charge it out of my deposit, whatever.
Yeah.
But then if they do that to 5 things, the deposit doesn't cover it.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, and your house is getting neglected, and all these things.
So a lot of times, maintenance, having someone that goes in there and catches it, and sees those things is a huge, and that's a whole separate thing. But just reminds me when we talk about those responsibilities.
Well, we take I just thought of we take over leases from another management company, and we'll take it over because they're having, a hard time at this other company. So we bring them on and we get the lease, and it says something like the tenant is responsible for the home warranty service call. And it's like,
they're never going to do that.
They're never going to do it. Number one, home warranties are horrible. Number two, why are they going to pay out of pocket if it was just like a mechanical failure that's the landlord's responsibility?
Yeah.
And the landlord's sitting there like, oh, I love it because I don't have to pay the fee. But what happens is it's just neglected.
You're paying in a different way.
And so you're gonna pay in a different way all at once rather than pay a little service fee. Like pay to get that water heater fixed now, instead of the tenant will say, well, if I have to pay the service fee, maybe I'll just try and fix it myself.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, they've got a wrench on the water heater. And
I got a buddy that down the street that says he knows how to fix it, put some tape on it. It's good.
Yeah, that's what happens. So then when we renew those leases, we have to have these conversations with the owner. That's like, hey, look, we're taking that home warranty thing out of there. Not good. Here's why.
Yeah.
It doesn't protect you. Saves you $75 here and there just for you to spend hundreds of dollars later to fix it.
Yep, exactly. All right. Number 3, the last in the top 3, the number 3 thing that they should do
is your property managers should fill your vacancies. So we say it all the time. I mean, it's like over and over and over, but vacancy is the most expensive line item on your expense sheet, on your balance sheet with rentals. And so they should be able to not only fill your vacancy, but fill it with a qualified good tenant that's been background checks, credit checks, sex offender checks, eviction history, landlord history, and meets all those criteria.
Right.
So it does start as early as pictures, the lockbox, the sign, the digital marketing, the third-party websites, all of that stuff. But then it's those leads come in. It's like a funnel. You'll get like 300 leads, and then maybe 20 are interested, 10 see the house, 5 apply, and then you get the best applicant. Like there should be a funnel of, a sales funnel or a sales process for that to happen. With us, we have, a team of leasing agents. So if one's at lunch or one calls in or one's on vacation, you've got a team that's handling this high volume of leads. They'll schedule showings. We do, self showings. We do different things.
By far, our busiest phone department is the lease.
And
I mean, it rings nonstop.
It's nonstop, and some questions are just silly, and so it's a hard, repetitive OnCue property management. How can I help you type deal? And then, yes, that is the price that you're looking at
Yeah.
on Zillow when you call
No,
me
they
or
will not
whatever.
take half of that.
Yeah.
But thank you.
But it's funny though, but some of those, every one of those calls, that person is interested in housing. So it's like we try and get them and funnel them into our
Yeah.
housing. I kind of mentioned, the criminal background checks, credit checks, all of that stuff that has to, we have minimum standards. Your property manager should have minimum standards.
Right.
You should look at those before you sign on the dotted line. A lot of those aren't going to be in the management agreement. It's going to be a policy within the company. And for us, it's full disclosure. It's on our website. Anybody, tenant, owner, anybody can look at the qualifications and make sure they're abiding by fair housing laws and know what they're doing with ESA animals or ESA, emotional support animals.
Yeah.
ESA animals, the animals. But then, once you get somebody qualified, your property manager should be executing the lease. They should be doing the move-in inspection and documenting the property, and they should collect the first month's rent and the deposit and do all of those things to actually fill the vacancy, get the utilities out of the owner's name, and facilitating all that, exchanging keys, garage remotes. And I feel like I'm just forgetting one of the main things, but filling that vacancy and preparing the owner to start receiving rent.
Yeah.
It's the most fulfilling too. And I joke with the leasing agents because they're like, hey, this owner is so tough. They won't lower the price. So they won't do this. They won't do that. And it's like filling that vacancy will solve all of the landlord's problems. And we have to remind them, like, dude, don't be, splitting hairs here. Like as soon as that tenant moves in and you get that first rent check, you're just like, oh yeah, that's why we did this.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why when we present applications, we don't give them all the nitty gritty details because we don't need, you don't want the owner to be like, I was really hoping a family would live there. Or I was really hoping, and not in a malicious way, just
a lot of their questions are they married or do they have kids? And you're like, doesn't matter, dude. Like
we're just trying to get somebody
with fair housing. It's like, hey, as long as they meet the criteria. And after they've been through it once, our clients are great with the next time around. They're like, no, I get it, man. Like it didn't matter. A lot of them want to know their name so that they can guess their ethnicity or their, or are they married? Are they gonna have kids and trash my house? And you're like, oh yeah, we need to have a conversation about that.
Or they want to do their own detective work and, look them up on Facebook or see if they're a sex offender. And it's like, hey, this is why you're paying us.
Yeah.
We're doing all that. Don't worry about it.
A lot of it is just like you and I are talking and trying to educate the listeners. That's what we do every day is the property managers. They're strictly just educating our clients. And the first time around is always the trickiest. And then the second and the third and the fourth, they're like, oh yeah, I trust the process.
Yeah.
You got qualified tenants in there, the credit, the income, everything checked out. They moved out and we're ready to do it all over again.
Right. Okay. So let's say, ready to hire a property management company. All three of those boxes are ticked. You go through, they do all those things. You're comfortable with them. What other things, outside of that top three, what are the other things that you think are worth digging into and considering?
Yeah. So as far as considering, you want to kind of see what other companies' ancillary services are. So like whether they have any sort of insurance for eviction like an eviction protection insurance. Hey, if there's an eviction, am I paying cash out of pocket?
Right.
Or can I pay a fee or a percentage or a flat something to have coverage? That's pretty popular. I would ask about inspections. So what's included? Is the move in, the move out, routine inspections, spot inspections, filter changes.
Filter changes are so huge out here. I know they're not in other states, not as much, but man, in Arizona.
No, it's funny that you say that. We go to like a conference or something and people are like, oh, you guys do filter changes? Like they actually physically go in and change the filter. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's one of the services. And they're like, we change our filters maybe once or twice a year, maybe.
And it's like, man, out here, that thing's pumping. You have to change it. We had a guy who worked for us for a while doing AC, and he was like, we don't need to do these filtered things. I'll bet you $100 that these tenants change them every month. And I said, I will take that $100 because there is no way.
Well, the same guy. So we're talking about the same person. Yeah. He will not be named, but he is one of our AC techs. But then they do what did we call them? AC tune-ups, every spring before the summer. And they go do the tune-up and they pull out the filter that they put in last year's
year's
tune
tune-up.
up.
Yeah.
And it's just caked, dude.
It
And
looks
he's-
like a wool sweater just like stuck up there.
And
Yeah.
he's just like, oh yeah, that's the reason your AC is inefficient. It's because they're trying to suck a sweater through the return register, you know? So-
it's definitely out of sight, out of mind for especially so many people are moving in. You know, it could be their first time.
In Arizona. Yeah.
Yeah. First time they just moved here.
And I own my home. I own a property management company. I've been in the business for 10 plus years. And I don't change my filter every month like I should. So I'm telling you, your tenants don't.
They're not doing
They don't do it.
Yeah.
And then the other ancillary services that you may consider, depending on your house, is stuff like pest control, landscaping, or pool service. We highly recommend owners take care of the pool service. So in Arizona, again, another hot topic is pools. But landscaping, usually you throw it on the tenant. But if your yard is very high maintenance, has a lot of grass, needs heavy watering, a lot of trimming, it's like it'd be better to bump up the rent a little bit and include a service of somebody you trust,
right?
Rather than let the tenant do it and they just let stuff die.
Yeah.
You know? And then pest control service could be same thing. I mean, we've got scorpions here. We've got all sorts of different.
I hate them so much.
Different. Oh yeah, I forgot you hate scorpions.
God.
Oh, dude.
Sorry,
I mentioned that, dude.
Yeah, it's triggering.
Like,
I'm triggered.
Yep.
Yeah.
The last thing is just it's kind of the intangible, I would say, of you can't really put it on a list of a must-have or checklist, but it's kind of the intangible benefit of having a property manager you trust. So we've even had some big portfolios we manage for, and the number one thing that they see is like, oh yeah, this stuff in writing, fees, services, that's great. But they kind of close that and they go, who are you?
Yeah.
They get to know you, and you want that intangible relationship. It needs to be in front of everything, because if you trust them, then if they don't get a hold of you, or we don't get a hold of the owner and we have to make a decision for them, they're like, no, I trust Ben, dude. He's my property manager. He's been my property manager for 5 years. If he took an emergency call and that had to be done for the health and safety of my client or the tenant, I trust him.
Yeah.
Like, getting to that point is the goal. So
absolutely.
A lot of times the day you hire us or another property manager, that it's not instant trust, right? It takes months and months and months, maybe years. And then something happens and you're like, no, dude, I get it. I trust you, So I'd say that's the last thing that's not on the official list.
Yeah.
But it's the intangible, like, relationship.
It's a big deal, I think, because right now too, especially, with technology and stuff, you see these companies that are coming up that are like, you don't need a property manager. This app does everything or whatever. And that might work great for some people, but there is something to being able to like, hey, I'm going to call Eric real quick and get his advice on this.
Yeah. And they should be your advocate. They should be like, oh no, like, I've got your back. I actually have a phone call. I don't know if they listen to this, but I have a phone call after this recording here with an owner that isn't stoked about some of the fair housing laws and like different things. Right. And so my talk with him is more going to be, hey, look, part of our job is to be your advocate and keep you out of the courtroom, keep you out of some, this is a health and safety issue we're dealing with. And it's like, dude, I promise you, we got to obey the statutes and the fair housing, and it's going to cost you a little bit of money to fix this thing that you don't want to fix, but it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that months from now, years from now, whatever it is, he'll look back and say, do you know what? I'm glad OnCue educated me on that and kept me out of the spotlight of a fair housing issue, and it's like,
exactly.
And so you really should have an advocate. Sometimes they're hard conversations to have, and it's just like,
but it goes a long way just having a person to talk to. I think it's kind of like, this is an example I see all the time is people, anybody could go look up what a law is, right? But there's always somebody who's like, do you know a lawyer I could like, isn't your cousin a lawyer?
Yeah.
Can I ask him a question?
Yep.
Like, you just want to hear from a human.
You just want to hear somebody like say what you think is.
And you might be in the wrong, but it's like, I could read those words, I could read the fair housing thing, but it's like that guy wants to get on the phone and say like, Eric, do I have to, what is this?
And somebody, to your point, somebody that's in the industry of whatever law they're practicing, and they've had examples of like, oh yeah, dude, hey Ben, sorry, you're interpreting that wrong. There's a case just like this last year, and the guy got reamed. And you're like, oh yeah, I don't want that.
Yeah. When I lived in Utah, man, everybody had a cousin who was a lawyer. Everybody knows somebody, and they're always just like, let me call my cousin real quick.
And it's just like, who knows what and who's who you're most comfortable with. And that's what I bring this conversation up. I'm going to have this afternoon, because It's somebody that trusted us enough to hire us. We're collecting rent. We filled the
Sure.
vacancy. We're doing these things. And then boom, something happens with the AC unit and, just snowballed. And now they're not mad, but they're not super happy.
Sure.
And so it's kind of like, hey, look, this is why it happened.
Yeah.
I wanted to keep you out of the limelight. If this tenant would have called an attorney, you would have got reamed,
Yeah,
and
you
so
lose.
you'd lose. So we had to do this, to keep you out of it. So
Yeah.
it's more of a, I feel like we're being the owner's advocate and saying, hey, look, we took care of the tenant. The tenant's now happy, 100% happy. And it's because we obeyed the statute and obeyed the law.
Yeah.
I know you don't like the law, but I didn't write the law. I didn't write the law. And frankly, the judge is going to side with the tenant in this issue. So anyway, hopefully that helps.
All right. Well, I think that's it. I think we covered it. Way more than 3 there because we listed so much at the end, but those first 3, pay attention to those and they will help you out. And that's it for us this time. So be sure to subscribe to the show and leave us a review if you can. It really helps out. And we will see you guys next time.